Hey yo, what's good, people? It's your boy reporting straight from the 90s. And you know what's crazy? When you think about it, there was a time when Sega stood tall. They weren't the underdog, they weren't the nostalgia brand, they were the one pushing boundaries, making noise and causing Nintendo hella sleepless nights. And in the late 90s, when their back was against the wall and the game industry was changing mad fast, Sega made one last move, their final swing. It was called Dreamcast, and for the moment, it felt like the future had arrived early. This wasn't just another console, it was ambition in plastic form. A system that spoke to the arcade kids, the rebels, the ones who wanted something different. Sega threw everything they had at it, money they didn't have, tech the world hadn't seen, and creativity that was too bold for the market they were in. It was powerful, loud, and full of soul. And just like that, it was gone. This is the story of a console that came out swinging, burned brighter than anyone expected, and collapsed under the weight of hype, timing, and corporate chaos. But even in demise, the Dreamcast left fingerprints all over modern gaming. We're telling the whole story, raw and unfiltered. So you already know what's up. Get your damn controllers ready and let's play. To understand the Dreamcast, you gotta understand what came right before it. Because Sega didn't build that console from a place of confidence, they built it from desperation. See, in the early 90s, Sega was on fire. The Genesis was outselling the Super Nintendo in the US.
Oh, over here!
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less.
Wait, kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
I knew that.
Sonic the Hedgehog, more action, more speed. Sega Genesis, it's a whole lot more for less.
Sonic was the hottest thing since Jordan's, and Sega had that rebellious, too cool for Nintendo energy that connected with the whole generation. But behind the smoke, the machine was already starting to shake. The trouble really started with the Sega CD and the 32X. Both were add-ons to the Genesis, and it was meant to stretch its life, but all they really did was confuse parents, frustrate developers, and waste time. Then came the Saturn, rushed, expensive, and hard to make games for. Sony came through with the PlayStation, smoother and cheaper, and made Sega look old overnight. It was a shift in power overnight. Sega went from trendsetters to outsiders looking in. By 1997, Sega was bleeding money. The Saturn was dead in America. Their hardware team and their software team were beefing constantly. Japan and America couldn't agree on anything. Confidence was low, the execs were tired. The stores were even losing faith, and Sega's rep with gamers was totally damaged.
Sega's errors as a company, though, have been well documented. Its last home console flopped, and it's seen its market share plummet from more than 50% to about 1%.
But here's what made Sega different from the rest. When they were in a corner, they swing harder. Internally, they knew they had to do something bold, something nobody else was doing. They didn't have the money to compete head-to-head with Sony, so instead, they just decided to try to out-innovate them. They'd build something sleek, something arcade-capable, something online, something that screamed, "We still got it." Not for the casuals, not for the suits, for the gamers, for the streets. Know what I mean? They were ready to take one last shot, and if it failed, they'd go out swinging. That was the energy behind the Dreamcast. Not corporate strategy, not tech for tech's sake, just a battered company trying to remind the world that when Sega was locked in, they could change the game. And they almost did. Sega didn't build the Dreamcast in peace, they built it in chaos. Behind the scenes, the company was fractured. Sega of Japan and Sega of America were moving like two different kingdoms under one banner. One side wanted power, the other wanted control, and while the Saturn was still gasping for air in the late 90s, Sega quietly started working on what will become its replacement. Not one, but two separate teams, each cooking up their own next-gen console in secret. One team was out in the US, partnered with 3D Effects, the company that made those big boy graphics cards for PC gamers. Their prototype was codenamed Black Belt, and it had the muscle. Meanwhile, back in Japan, another team was working on a different build using Hitachi's SH4 CPU and Power VR2 graphics tech. This one was codenamed Katana. 2 consoles, same mission, save Sega from extinction. Then, the beef got real. 3D Effects, hungry for clout, started bragging to the public about their Sega deal before Sega made anything official. Corporate chest puffing gone wrong. Sega didn't like that at all. They pulled the plug on 3D Effects project on the spot. Black Belt was dead. Katana was in. The Dreamcast innards would come from the Japanese team solely. That move triggered a nasty legal fight. 3D Effects sued Sega. It was messy, but Sega didn't have time to care. They were on the clock, trying to launch a new console before Sony's PlayStation 2 came in and swallowed the whole industry. So now, with Katana officially in the driver's seat, Sega went full speed ahead. The design was bold for its time. It had a 56K modem built in.
US Robotics 56K modem download at incredible speeds, so you can finally unlock the true power of the internet.
That was unheard of in '99. It used GD-ROMs, not CDs or DVDs. Custom discs that held more data but made piracy harder, in theory anyway. And it could pump out arcade-level graphics without breaking a sweat. Thanks to the Power VR2 chip, the same tech powering Sega's most advanced arcade cabinets. But Sega was also broke. They were pouring every last dollar into this new console. Every decision had weight. They couldn't afford another flop, so the Dreamcast had to hit. Had to, or it was game over for real. And here's the wild part. It almost didn't launch. Japanese execs didn't trust Sega of America to handle the US release. Internal drama was thick, the kind of drama that kills projects, but somehow, some way, Sega kept it moving.
Is the Dreamcast Sega's ticket to a comeback, or is it Sega hype? Perhaps the real question is, should I buy it?
They settled on the name Dreamcast, a mix of dream and broadcast, because they believed this console wasn't just about games, it was about bringing people together. Sega had the console. Now, they just had to convince the world to care.
We got her!
September 9th, 1999. This date hit different. In gamer history, it's sacred. 9/9/99 wasn't just a console launch, it was Sega's resurrection party. And for a brief moment, it looked like Dreamcast was about to change everything. The build-up was loud. Sega hit the streets hard with a marketing campaign that had teeth. Billboards, commercials, magazine spreads. Everywhere you look, that orange swirl was spinning, and the tagline, it's thinking. Simple, mysterious, and slick. MTV had it on rotation. Tony Hawk was talking about it. Wrestling fans saw it during Monday night shows. And if you were a kid in the 90s, the Dreamcast launch felt like an event. And it wasn't just hype. It had the muscle to back it up. At launch, the Dreamcast didn't come weak. It dropped 19 titles, and not filler either. We're talking about Soul Calibur, Sonic Adventure, NFL 2K, Power Stone, Hydro Thunder, Ready to Rumble, all on day one. Games that looked better than anything on PlayStation or N64, easily. Soul Calibur alone was a mic drop. People were walking into stores thinking it was just a port of an arcade version. Then they saw it was cleaner, smoother, with extra content, and ran it like a dream. No pun intended. The hardware itself, compact, slick, and futuristic in a way that didn't feel try-hard. The controller was bulky, but unique, rocking the infamous VMU, a little memory card with a screen on it. You could play mini games, check your plays in NFL 2K, and flex digital pets like it was a Tamagotchi for grown folks. It was weird, but in a weird, good way. Very Sega.
Showcasing over 40 Japanese and American titles in its booth, Sega made skeptics do a double take and turn doubters into believers. VideoGames.com editor Jeff Gertzman was one of them.
And let's talk numbers. The US launch was a record breaker. 225K sold in 24 hours. 98 million in revenue on day one. At the time, that was the biggest console launch ever. Sega looked like they were back in the ring, gloves on, swinging wild. The headlines were glowing, fans were eating, and for a second, just a second, the dream felt real. Sega was finally winning again. The Dreamcast had people talking. Sony was watching, Nintendo was quiet, and Microsoft didn't even show up yet. In that window of time, the small window, it looked like Sega pulled it off.
Our retail receipts for consoles and software will be bigger than the movie receipts of the box office. It looks to me like we're cruising towards a $7.5 billion business in the year 2000.
But every rise has a shadow, and what Sega couldn't see, or maybe just didn't want to admit, was that the game was about to change again. There was a stretch where real ones remember when the Dreamcast was on fire. For maybe a year, maybe a little less, but long enough to make its mark. This was the Dreamcast in motion, living, breathing, thinking. It wasn't hype anymore, it was happening. The console was out, the games were dropping, and for a little while, Sega had the streets talking again. Let's keep it a buckaroo. No other console at the time was touching the raw heat Sega was pumping out. It wasn't just graphics, it was the feel, the energy. Sega was back in their creative bag. This wasn't safe corporate gaming. This was arcade soul straight to your living room. Soul Calibur wasn't just a fighting game, it was art. Fluid, explosive, built like it was from another planet compared to anything else. Sonic Adventure had kids wide-eyed chasing whales through collapsing piers like, what is this? Power Stone turned your crib into a straight-up anime arena. Tables getting flipped, crates getting thrown, transformations mid-fight. And then came the 2K series, NFL 2K and NBA 2K, which didn't just compete with Madden and Live. They embarrassed them. Better graphics, smoother animations, tighter presentation, even the commentary was miles ahead. Madden got caught sleeping, and 2K made sure the world knew it. Sega was innovating in real time. Games like Jet Set Radio were cel-shaded graffiti explosions before anybody even thought to touch that style. Phantasy Star Online dropped and let people play online RPGs on a console in 2000 with dial-up before Xbox Live, before PSN.
The Dreamcast provides internet connectivity, a 56K built-in modem at $199. At launch, email, chat, and an unbelievable amount of content.
While Sega was lighting it up on the front end, behind the scenes, things were cracking. The Dreamcast was moving units, but not enough to cover the holes Sega had already dug. They were still bleeding cash from the Saturn era, still fixing bad blood with retailers, still split down the middle between Sega of America and Sega of Japan. Two branches with different visions, different pride, and zero alignment. But the real storm was coming from outside the house. Sony was moving silent, real silent, too silent. They've been watching Dreamcast cook. They saw Soul Calibur make waves. They saw 2K Sports catch fire, but Sony wasn't rushing to respond. They didn't need to. They had something else in the chamber, something that made Sega nervous before it was even real, the PlayStation 2. Sony came out swinging with the promise of not just a more powerful console, but a multimedia powerhouse. It had a DVD drive, full backwards compatibility with PS1 games, plus hype from every direction. And parents ate it up. They didn't care about the frame rates or the arcade ports. They saw PlayStation and DVD player and were like, oh, we buying that, period. Meanwhile, Sega couldn't afford to add DVD. They went with GD-ROMs to save money and avoid piracy. But by 2000, it looked outdated. And while the Dreamcast had online play before Sony just promised online too, without even delivering it, and people still waited. Retailers started pulling back on Dreamcast inventory to make space for the PS2. Media attention shifted, and the worst part, the streets started getting quiet. That Dreamcast buzz started fading. Gamers were holding out for the PS2, even though they hadn't seen it do anything yet. That's how strong Sony's grip was on the market. Sega had proven power, proven games, proven tech, but hype is undefeated, and Sony's hype was generational.
There are waiting lists and tickets just to stand in line and get a chance to buy PlayStation 2. That is PlayStation 2, the hottest game to hit the market, and it arrives in the U.S. tomorrow. But some people are standing in line already trying to buy this toy. And
at the same time, Sega's finances hit a wall. They were selling consoles below cost, gambling on volume they couldn't hit. They didn't have the market budget to go another round, and investors started whispering. Executives started plotting exits. Internally, they started talking about the unthinkable. What if we just stopped making consoles? On January 31st, 2001, Sega pulled the plug. They announced that they were ending Dreamcast production and exiting the console business altogether. It hit the industry like a gut punch. Nobody really expected it to happen that fast. And fans, especially the ones who have been loyal to the Sega through Genesis, through Saturn, and now Dreamcast, felt it in their chest. The same company that made Sonic, the same company that clowned Nintendo with Genesis does what Nintendo don't, the same console that gave you the arcade life at home was walking away. The Dreamcast didn't get a proper ending. It was one of the cleanest, boldest, most innovative consoles ever made, and it got left behind in the middle of its run. Sega had been swinging with everything they had, but by the end, they had nothing left to swing with. The Dreamcast didn't get the ending it deserved, but it earned its place in history anyway. When most people look back on it, they focus on the failure, the short run, the sales, the numbers that never hit where they needed to. But if that's all you see, you miss the Dreamcast and what it really was. A system that was way ahead of its time, packed with ideas the rest of the industry wouldn't catch up with for years. It was the first console to come with a built-in modem. That meant online play straight out the box in an era when most people were still getting used to email. Then there was the innovation in how games looked and played. Jet Set Radio introduced cel-shaded graphics, which felt like playing a living cartoon. That visual style didn't just inspire other games, it created a whole new aesthetic that would show up in hits like The Legend of Zelda, Wind Waker, and Borderlands. Shenmue gave us 3D open-world exploration before GTA 3 ever pulled up. NPCs with daily schedules, working clocks, interactive environments, all that immersive stuff people praise now, Sega was already doing it. And the controller, people joked about it being clunky, but let's keep it real. It laid the blueprint for the Xbox controller. The analog stick placement, the triggers, the shape. Microsoft studied that Dreamcast joint. Let's not forget 2K Sports. The franchise was born on the Dreamcast, and it came out swinging hard enough to make EA duck the console altogether. NFL 2K was so clean, so fast, so real that Madden looked like it was just stuck in the past. And when NBA 2K showed up, it was the beginning of the dynasty that would eventually run the basketball game in space. Dreamcast didn't fail because it was weak. It failed because the timing was wrong. The money ran out and the market wasn't ready. But what it left behind, that energy, that innovation, that raw soul, it stuck around. It influenced entire platforms, genres, studios, and players. People still boot up Dreamcast in 2025, not just for nostalgia, but because the game still hit. The vibe is still alive, and the console still feels like it was built with love. And that's exactly why it's one of the greatest consoles of all time. The Dreamcast was never just a console, it was a message. A final love letter from a company that has spent years pushing boundaries, setting trends, and refusing to play by the rules. Sega went out swinging, not with the money or the best timing, but with heart, imagination, and unshakable belief that gaming could be something more. And it's a wrap, y'all. So if this brought back memories, taught you something new, or just gave you that nostalgic hit you've been craving, do me a favor, drop a like, hit that subscribe, and tell me in the comments what your favorite Dreamcast game was. We're just getting started with these deep dives. More stories, more heat, more consoles. Stay locked in. And as always, keep winning. We out, y'all.